What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, we're going to be covering the difficult yet very important process of team building in Pokemon Go. I've been in your shoes at one point in time, struggling with finding a team. Maybe finding a team or being recommended a team, but simply not having those Pokemon or a secondary charge move unlocked. I'm going to be walking through my entire process of how I pick a team, how I get from the start, how I get to the finish, and everything in between. I also want to give a huge shout out to Zionic, a PvP YouTuber who covered a lot of these core concepts as well on his channel. So if you're interested in getting his perspective, I'm going to put a video in the link in the description. Go ahead and check that out, show some support. But anyways, if you do enjoy this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So the first step that I like to do is just to get general inspiration. And two ways to do that are graphics like this, where you're seeing user recommended battles. This is actually collected by people running their own simulations and getting the most popular ones and the most popular results or the best results. So this is a great way to just kind of get a general pulse of some Pokemon that we may want to go ahead and look out for when we are building our team. So for example, one thing that we could probably point out is that Azumarill and Registeel are a very core common group for the Great League, for example. That's something that I've kind of noticed from this. Another thing to probably point out is that Altaria seems to be fairly common as well. So that's something that we can kind of look out for. And then just the individual top performers. A Pokemon like Tropius is an absolute beast, but you definitely have to make sure that you can build a team around that. And then of course there are some other Pokemon, and hopefully you've just seen a ton of these. But at the end of the day, though, you may not have access to some of these. So something like a double legacy Dugong may be amazing, but it's not necessarily as accessible, so you may not see as many of them. Doesn't make it any worse, it just means a lot of people don't have it. So definitely taking a look at something like this is a good place for me to go ahead and start with my list. But the second place I like to go is actually heading over to pvpoke.com and checking out the ranking section, and head over to, of course, the league that you want to take a look at. And this is going to also give us kind of another idea of some of the more meta Pokemon that we're going to take a look at. So like I said before, we've seen Registeel, we've seen Azumarill, Altaria, Defense Form Deoxys is great. A lot of these Pokemon just show up so much because they are so amazing. But if you think about it, a lot of people might be looking at the source as well to go ahead and build a team. And even if you don't have these Pokemon, that does not mean that you are prevented from being successful. I don't have a Registeel, so basically I just build a team that doesn't include Registeel, but I do have something like an Azumarill. I have an Altaria, so keeping that in mind is very important as well. Of course, we are all limited in different ways. Just make sure at the end of the day, you're building a team that you can actually end up using. You've got the resource to unlock a secondary charge move. All that is very important. So basically, here's how it works. Whenever you are building a team in any other sport, you've got different positions that the players play. You may have like a shooting guard, a point guard, something like that in basketball. You could have a forward in soccer. Well, it's actually the exact same thing in Pokemon Go PvP. The first Pokemon is the lead Pokemon. And whatever Pokemon you go with, the second Pokemon that you pick is going to be the Pokemon that can hard counter everything that can hard counter your first Pokemon. So if you lead with something like an Azumarill, it may be weak to some grass type Pokemon. So maybe considering a flying type to counter those is a great way to kind of pair between them. And then finally, the third position in the PvP team is something known as the safe switch. Now this is a very important player on this team. This guy can go ahead and go kind of soft counter a couple things. It's kind of like the more neutral pick where it can cover just a lot of things. It can rover between the two. Very important. And I'll talk about my team in the final section of this and what plays which position, which Pokemon plays which position. So anyways, like I said, we got to start out with the lead Pokemon. So what's a good way for us to kind of find out what makes sense? Well, if you go ahead and head over to the lead section on the website, you can take a look at the Pokemon that are considered to be like the absolute top leads on this game. So, for example, I don't have a Mantine, so that's kind of like out of the picture of it. But you know what would be a very common Pokemon that a lot of people would end up having? That would probably be an Azumarill. So if we want to go ahead and go with Azumarill, what we can do is head over to the team building section of pvpoke.com, and we're going to input Azumarill into our team. So up next, what you're going to do is click on Rate Team. Once you do that, it's going to tell you what you beat, what you don't beat, what you're going to have to focus on. And the way that I have this set up is zeros are going to be wins, and then X's are going to be losses. That's actually not the default on the website, but I flipped it because this way just makes so much more sense to me that way. So we're going to have to worry about something like a Cresselia. We're going to have to worry about Zapdos, Tropius, Dugong, maybe not as much Zapdos. I mean, that one just doesn't come up as much, but you kind of get the picture. This is what we can beat, and this is looking great. I mean, this is kind of the top of the list, so yeah, Azumarill, definitely a solid pick. So if we go ahead and head down, there's going to be a potential threat section. And these are going to be the Pokemon that are most likely to counter yours and also being very meta relevant. So for example, we see a Pokemon like Meganium coming up there, and we're going to have to look out for that. We've got a lot of grass type Pokemon actually leading in at the top counters against us, and we're going to have to prepare for those. So like I said before, maybe some type of flying type could be good, potentially an ice. Something like that's going to be a very solid option, or a fire, for example. So if we go ahead and scroll down, we're going to get to a section that's going to be known as the potential alternatives, a way to fill out the rest of the team. So when I'm taking a look here, I'm seeing an Alolan Muck, I'm seeing a Azuelos, Blaziken. I don't have Azuelos, I don't have an Alolan Muck ready for the Great League with a secondary charge move unlock, so those are kind of out of the option. But you know what I do have is an Altaria. And if you remember, if we head back over to the website, you'll see that Altaria is like a top 3 Pokemon overall. So adding that on, I mean, that just seems like a very natural pick to end up going with. So we're going to go with this. The moveset's perfectly fine. Dragon Breath, Sky Attack, Dragon Pulse, good to go on that. So we're going to go ahead and add Altaria. So now we've got Azumarill. We've got Altaria that's going to counter a lot of things that Azumarill is weak to. And then finally, we're going to go with the third Pokemon. Now keep in mind, some of the things that we're going to have to look out for are going to be a Cresselia, for example, and then a Dugong. Those two are the only ones that get a double X. That means that they beat both of our Pokemon. And that's going to end up coming up when we get to the potential threat section. And as you can see, they kind of rise to the top. We're seeing an issue with ice types, for example, and then a couple of other ones that could be kind of common. So when we go ahead and head down to the section, we want to be able to beat some of those Pokemon. So for example, we could end up going with Ferrothorn. I don't have a Ferrothorn though, but I do have a Meganium, so very excited about that one. So basically, even though we're going up against Pokemon like Lapras and Dugong that have ice type moves, because Meganium is so solid and those Pokemon are also part water type, you really can counter them and maybe invest a shield or something. But regardless of that, Meganium seems to fill the kind of third role. So we're going to go with that. Vine Whip, Frenzy Plant, Earthquake, good to go on that. And here is our team. So finally, we're going to go ahead and rate our team. And what we are looking for is making sure we don't have 3 X's across this. That is like a red flag. If you see a Pokemon up top, like you've got 3 X's against a Registeel, that's not good because Registeel is so common. Same thing with Azumarill. If you've got 3 X's going up against Azumarill, you're in big trouble because that Pokemon is so common. So just make sure you're not seeing 3 X's anywhere on the screen that is near the top. That is also a very common Pokemon. So we're going to go ahead and scroll down. Like we said before, we've got a couple of kind of soft spots, but we can still technically counter them. Dugong, luckily, is not as popular, so I'm not worried about it. Lapras, kind of the same situation. Skarmory is a very common option, so I'm going to have to be very, very careful about going up against a Skarmory since it does come up so much. But we'll keep that in the back of our mind, and that's going to come down to where once you get comfortable with these teams, once you use them a ton, you're going to realize, okay, Skarmory can beat me, but I have an Azumarill that has a chance at it. So you just have to kind of get control of the switching and use things correctly, and you can outpace people. Anyways, if we go ahead and jump back to this, we're going to notice that there is something that I skipped before, and that is the threat score. What you want to do is get the lowest threat score possible to come up with the most kind of safe team, or the most sound team that you can come up with. Getting something below a 675, something like that, is good. So if you can do that, that's kind of the goal that I've set for myself. This team is definitely well below that, so not a problem at all. And basically that's how I personally build teams. The next step is to get in there and do some battles. And honestly, the worst thing that you can do is say, okay, I built my team, I can do this, I'm gonna go out there, and you play one battle and then you go, okay, I lost, well, this team isn't good. And then you switch to another, and then you switch to another. If you keep switching to a bunch of different teams, you can't get used to it. To stick through these teams maybe for 5 sets, 25 battles, potentially more if you lose a little bit, but that's okay. The goal is that when you try out these teams, you're just trying to get used to it. You're trying to figure it out. That is completely normal to go through that and lose a couple in the beginning. Just know that your goal is to find a team that's going to be successful, but you have to be willing to try out that team to see if it actually works. So we're actually very close to building my own team that I have for myself that I've done like 500 battles with now. And we're going to go ahead and add in a Deoxys here. So when we go ahead and add in Defense Form Deoxys, we're going to see how good this team can be. So Pokebattler recommends Psycho Boost, but I'm going with Thunderbolt to help me cover Azumarill. And Deoxys is going to end up playing the safe switch position. If I've got something up against an Altaria, like for example, like the Steel type leaders, like a Bastiodon or a Registeel or something, I'm going in with Deoxys in that case. So if we go ahead and rate this team, you will see that if we head down to the threat meter, we've got a score of 628, which is pretty solid. It used to be 621 last season, but it has dropped a little bit just because of the meta shift in that way. But this team is something that I'm personally been using and had a lot of fun with, but it just took time. It took a lot of time for me to figure it out. It took, 20 plus battles to get it, but once I got it, I mean, I just jumped up in my rank because I finally figured out the team. I finally figured out to use it. So hopefully this has helped you in today's video. Let me know what teams you are using. What rank are you? What records do you have? Because the comment section can also be a great source of information. But anyways, if you do enjoy this episode and it was helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and I will see you next time.